Time for your Vikings post game. Vikings 42, Falcons 21. A double up, an almost absurd lopsided score, an absurd day in Vikings quarterbacking history in the lore of Kirk Cousins. I don't know what more you could have asked for from this game, but man, you got it. Sam Darnold, 5 touchdown passes, a near perfect passer rating. Kirk Cousins, 2 interceptions, costly interceptions at that, as he's trying to rally the Falcons down the stretch. Don't forget, this game was 14-10 at halftime, 14-13, 21-21 at the start of the fourth quarter. This game was right there in the balance. Sam Darnold brings them down the field. Another masterful, gotta have it drive from Sam Darnold. Gets them in the end zone. Ray McLeod fumbles the ensuing kickoff, and that's got nothing to do with Kirk Cousins, but he fumbles the ensuing kickoff. That right there is probably the play of the game, despite everything else everybody else did. Huge game for a bunch of guys, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that turns momentum. Darnold gets them in the end zone against 35-21 at that point. Cousins gets picked again. After that, Vikings go down and score again, 42-21, and they keep Kirk Cousins out of the end zone at the very end again to keep him on one of the worst stretches you could have imagined him being on, while Sam Darnold is on one of the hottest streaks of his career, has one of the greatest quarterbacking days in Vikings history, first 5-touchdown game since Dante Culpepper 20 years ago. All of this happens against Kirk Cousins. Like, you could not have, if you wanted some measure of revenge, maybe the wrong word, because Kirk Cousins had a largely productive, perfectly fine 6 years here. But if you wanted validation, I guess, that the thing I've been asking for 4 years, the thing that Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah came to the conclusion of this past offseason, if you wanted validation that moving on from Kirk Cousins was the thing to do to keep this franchise moving forward, you couldn't have asked for more in this game, because Cousins was the same old Kirk, but worse, right? Like, he can't move anymore. He was never the strongest armed quarterback, but I feel like whatever lingering effects there are of this Achilles injury, whatever he's still dealing with from that, plus, the ravages of time. He's 36 now. Whatever we're talking about from that is catching up to him, and his ball is maybe 10% less than it used to be. And it was never a super zippy ball to begin with. So you've got that. He can't move. He's not mobile. And his decision-making is getting worse. He's missing throws. He's making bad decisions. Picked twice in this game. Came in as the NFL's interception leader. And we've got some amazing stats that were brought up on the Fox TV broadcast. I thought the broadcast was very good today. They were in tune with the right subjects. They were in tune with what I was thinking about, the whole Darnold versus Cousins thing. Kirk Cousins now has thrown 2 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions in the fourth quarter of games this season. He's got the most interceptions of anybody in the league right now, or came in that way. He's got the most interceptions of anybody in any single quarter in the league right now, and that happens to be the fourth quarter crunch time. Remember, the Falcons were 6-3 at one point this season. They were 6-3 right at the point where all the questions started about Sam Darnold. Right when Sam Darnold had that 3-interception game against Jacksonville, his worst game of the year. Atlanta was 6-3 at that point, and you're like, yeah, man, maybe this thing is starting to flip. Maybe the whole Cousins narrative is starting to come back. Ever since that Jacksonville game, Sam Darnold, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think he's been turnover-free completely for the last 3 games. I think his only turnover in that span is the one he got tagged with on the pitch to Aaron Jones. I think that's the only turnover he has in those 4 games. Kirk Cousins, meanwhile, like I said, came in with the most interceptions in the league, 13, the most fumbles in the league, 12, and he's lost a few of those, and comes in throws 2 more of those picks. And in his last, I don't know what the span is, but they were 6-3. They've lost 4 in a row. His last however many games, 0 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions. 4 last week, 2 this week. So while Darnold is on an 11-0 heater, Cousins is on an 0-9 absolute bottoming out. They're 6-7 now, out of first place in their crummy division, and the calls for Michael Penix Jr. will only get louder now at this point. Problem is, Cousins is owed a ton of money. Are they going to pay him $90 million essentially to play this one season, cut bait, take a huge cap hit next year, and turn this thing over to Penix? I mean, that would just be admitting what a massive mistake you made. On the flip side, the Vikings getting 1 year, $10 million out of Sam Darnold right now, outplaying Cousins in every measure before this game, outplaying him in every measure in this game. And here's the misnomer, the thing I was harping on all last week, the thing I was harping on going into this game. Sam Darnold is not inherently more risky than Kirk Cousins. He just makes more big-time throws. But Kirk Cousins has been the riskier quarterback this season without the reward of the big-time throws that Sam Darnold makes. And Sam Darnold made a bunch of big-time throws. I think one of the key plays in the game was Darnold scrambling to avoid pressure. I think this was when the Vikings were down 14-13, scrambling to avoid pressure. Kevin O'Connell all year long has been saying he wants Darnold to look up at those points. Don't just take off and run with it. When you escape the pocket, don't always just tuck it down. He looks up, sees Justin Jefferson open way downfield, hits him for another long touchdown pass, 21-13 Vikings. I thought that was a huge moment in this game. 5 touchdowns for Darnold in this game, the whole narrative. So here's the thing, though. I got a question about this on Blue Sky. I asked for a bunch of questions from people. Can we really let Sam leave after this from the real Z's? Here's the catch-22 with Sam Darnold. It was always going to be set up as a catch-22 this season. If he played at the level he's playing right now, he was probably going to price himself out of where the Vikings might want to bring him back next year, because they are by all intents and purposes set to bring this thing to J.J. McCarthy next season. Now, I know there is no guarantee J.J. McCarthy is ever going to have a season as good as the one Sam Darnold is having right now. That is just reality. 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, top 10 Pro Football Focus grade, probably going to be in the top half of the ESPN total QBR. Like, you would hope J.J. McCarthy would have many years like that, but there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee J.J. McCarthy is going to be healthy next season. There's no guarantee J.J. McCarthy is going to stay healthy in his career. But they have set this thing up for cheap quarterback play for the next 3 years of J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold's going to get expensive. The Access Vikings guys said 45 million next year. That was before this game. I don't think that's too far-fetched at this point. I thought it was at a certain point, but he is playing like a top 10 quarterback. He's playing like a guy who is going to get paid like a top 10 quarterback. I mean, Kirk Cousins is making $45 million this year. Sam Darnold is outplaying him. Sam Darnold is outplaying a lot of people who are making more money than him this year. Some people might look at it and say, is it a one-year wonder? Is it the Kevin O'Connell effect? But somebody is going to pay Sam Darnold. Now, the question then becomes, what would it take for the Vikings to reconsider this plan? We've talked about this a bunch of times on this show. We've talked about it a bunch of times on Access Vikings. I don't know what the threshold is. I think winning the Super Bowl probably gives you pause at a certain point. If you win the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold, you are going to have a hard time saying, thanks for the memories. Let's go win a Super Bowl with J.J. McCarthy now. I think that would be hard. Anything short of that, even a deep playoff run, which is, again, folks, going to be difficult just because of the position they are in the division. They are still trailing the Lions by a game in this division. If they don't gain a game sometime in the next few weeks, but the Lions play the Bills next week, there's a chance they could catch up, chance they could make this Week 18 matchup in Detroit interesting. But if we're being honest, like, Detroit is by far the front runner still to win this division, which means the Vikings are trending to be a 5 seed. They can't get higher than a 5 seed as the first wild card on the road for 3 playoff games. I'm not saying they can't win 3 road playoff games on the way to the Super Bowl, but their path is hard because of where they are in the division. Anyway, that's a factor. But the fact that he has played himself into this conversation, that he has played so well that we have to have this conversation, is one side of this catch-22. The other side is that if he played so poorly that you wouldn't want him back, then he wouldn't be coming back either. So there was not really much of an opportunity where you could say Sam Darnold will be on this roster in 2025. The only way you can imagine it happening at this point is if he has such an amazing, last 4 games playoff run that they say, look, I don't care what the plan was. We love J.J. McCarthy, but man, we think we found our guy. We're going to pay him like that guy for the next 5 years. We got to do something different. Maybe they keep McCarthy. I don't know what they do at that point. Maybe they do a bridge deal and try to push this down the road. I don't know what they do, but they're going to have a hard time convincing themselves unless they make a deep playoff run that giving up on the plan they have right now is the right thing to do. So that's where I'm at with J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold. I just don't think they're going to do that unless something happens in the postseason. Now, again, Darnold's making this conversation a lot more uncomfortable. When it was 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions coming off that 3-pick game against Jacksonville, your decision is a lot easier. Now it's 28-10, 4 really good games in a row, a 6-game winning streak. They're 11-2. You cannot just take that for granted. Now, Real Tim Flagstone said, why is C.J. Ham so great? Why does he remain underrated? I think fullbacks are just underrated in general. I think C.J. Ham is terrific. I think sometimes a guy gets a reputation, maybe isn't super highly regarded coming out of college, plays at a Division II school in college. That label follows you around. You're always going to be, quote unquote, underrated if you are kind of that ilk. Brendan wants to know, does Sam prefer a home-cooked meal or takeout? I don't know what Sam would prefer, but he was fired up. You got the sense that this game mattered to him. There was a national narrative going around before the game that the Vikings aren't talking yet, haven't even begun, haven't approached any kind of contract talks with him for next season. So he goes out and puts up 5 touchdowns, no interceptions against the guy that used to have his job last year. He doesn't show a ton of emotion, but he was fired up. Fans do an MVP chance, all that stuff. So I think this meant a lot to him. I think he was fired up in this game. I think if at the end of the day, he's probably still a takeout guy.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
T-Gage, Tom Murphy says, where does this wide receiver duo rank in Vikings history? Let's pull up that box score because that is an obscene box score. I don't know if we should, not safe for work to show you this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Man, both those wide receivers going for over 100 yards. Both of them had at least 2 touchdowns. Addison 3 touchdowns, 8 for 133. Jefferson 7 for 132. You see all the numbers. Vikings gave up a ton of yards, but again, those turnovers made a huge difference. Falcons getting a little conservative on some plays made a difference. I think ultimately this is not Randy Moss, Chris Carter territory. Those guys were just so good. Two Hall of Famers. This is not any conversation about how good a Vikings receiver duo is or was. Starts with those two and ends with those two. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, that was pretty good for a while there. I think that's a hard one to kind of overlook. I think this one's got a pretty good chance to be special. And part of it is that Jefferson is just that good, right? Like he is the number one. He's the best receiver in football. So anybody you pair with him, obviously, just automatically is going to elevate that into a certain level of the conversation. But Addison's really, really leveled up his game lately. He's been really good lately. I think we did a segment like a month ago, like Addison's been terrible. What's going on? I think ever since that he's been great. So I think it's more the trust factor, Darnold finding him, realizing what they can unlock when they don't just focus in on Jefferson, right? Because all those picks against Jacksonville, those were all intended for Jefferson. They were forcing that ball in. It's like, look, you got Hawkinson, you got Addison, you got Josh Oliver, you got Aaron Jones out of the backfield. Like, check it down. You don't have to be a hero throwing it to Jefferson every single time. So I think he's figured that out, especially with Addison. Addison's been great adjusting to the ball on deep routes, things like that. So I think that's been a major part of their offense, finally looking explosive, finally looking like a team that's just capable of moving up and down the field. And obviously 42 points, a season high by far for them. That will help. That will help impressions of things in general. On Twitter, Ant VP says, "Are they winning the Super Bowl this year?" Again, I talked about the seeding, how it's going to be hard because they're stuck behind Detroit. If Detroit ends up winning this thing, I think that's hard because you got to win 3 road games, probably, unless there's other upsets along the way. So that's the thing that's sticking with me right now. Detroit is a better team. They've got a lot of defensive problems now, though, right? They've got a lot of injuries in the defense on the secondary, the second level. So they are vulnerable right now, whether it's in the playoffs, whether it's dropping a game, whether it's week 18 against the Vikings. So I'm not giving up on them winning the division, but that is a hard thing. I will say this is a game that made me a believer maybe in a way that I wasn't before. I've been kind of eking games out. I think you got to win like that in the NFL. You've been squeezing games out. Come back against the Cardinals last week. Almost give it away against the Bears 2 weeks ago, but rally to win. Like doing some impressive things in kind of those winning time plays. This was different. Yeah, it was 21-21 going into the fourth, but man, they really put their foot down, really accelerated into the finish, 42 points. So I think this changes the narrative a little bit. You see Sam Darnold taking it to another level in this game. Again, a lot of good teams in the NFC, a lot of good teams across the board, but they are 11-2 right now. You cannot take that away from them. So I think at least you have to have them in that conversation because they are proving they are worthy of it. Just going to check and see if we got any more new questions in before we wrap this thing up. No, just mostly people happy. I mean, again, the narrative going in, it was Darnold against Cousins. You know that Cousins sometimes struggles under pressure. He struggles when the emotions get the best of him, things like that. Darnold, the opposite of that, right? Calm. He's got that escapability. Took some sacks early. I thought the pass rush got to them early, but he figured that out, made some plays with his feet, extended plays. Everything that he is that Kirk Cousins isn't was on display in this game, and all of Kirk Cousins' flaws that he brought with him from Minnesota to Atlanta were on display as well. If you are a Vikings fan, if you are Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, if you are Kevin O'Connell, you could not have asked for a more validating or satisfying Sunday afternoon. That'll do it for me here today. Royce and I, I'm sure we'll talk plenty of Vikings on Monday's show. Andrew Kramer film review should be a fun one on Tuesday. Until then, thanks for sticking with me. We'll talk to you later.